Welcome back to the Real Wealth Solutions podcast. I am one of your hosts, Greg Scully. We've got Darren Light reporting from Panera after executing a early morning emergency water heater situation. So he is thumbs up and mostly muted because of Panera's substandard background music. Joining us today, we have a local friend and investor and all-around successful guy, Mr. Jesse Shelton. We've met a couple of times at numerous meetups. He's had quite a bit of success on the flipping side of real estate, developing some systems, and has built enough of a portfolio of rentals that I think by his own definition, he is financially free and sitting in a pretty good foundation. See, Freudian slip. We'll get to the foundation here in a bit. He's sitting in a pretty good position so that he can start focusing on some other goals he wants to accomplish, which will be made possible by his success in real estate. So that's kind of the stuff we're going to talk about today. So Jesse, welcome. Appreciate your time today. You mind giving us an intro into where you've been, what you've done, what you're currently doing?
Of course, yeah. First off, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Yeah, like I said, my name is Jesse Shelton. Originally, I was a teacher. I taught some high school students. My wife and I moved to Japan back in, I think, 2014. We were teaching elementary over there, came back to the States. I was teaching elementary here. And by the end of that year, the first year I got back in the States, probably 2016, I think is what it was, I was teaching elementary school, and I realized that I was spending the majority of my day trying to keep kids sitting in their seats and not doing much teaching, actually. And I got a little tired of it, and I was ready to move on. And I had been teaching my elementary students a class in entrepreneurship. It was an interesting class, an interesting school where I was able to develop some of the curriculum myself. And so I was teaching them a class on entrepreneurship. So I was teaching them all these things about, everything from, marketing to, how to run a sustainable business to this and that and this and that. And I realized I was teaching them all these things and I wasn't really doing any of that. So when I decided to take a little bit of time off from teaching, I decided to flip a house, convinced my wife to let me do it. Started with, I think we had $3,000. And that's what I had to start with. Flipped a house. About 6 months later, flipped another one. And then one day I was sitting down, and it was in January of 2017, I think is what it was. I was sitting down and I was thinking about some of the impact that I was wanting to have in the world, particularly in environmental issues and animal welfare issues, and just realized that I had very limited capacity I didn't have limited capacity, I had limited resources. I had, the mental capacity and the desire and the drive to get out there and do some things, but with such a limited financial background, I was going to be reliant on begging for money, donations and raising money and stuff. So I decided that a better way of doing it, a way that I was more comfortable with, would be to generate an ongoing passive income source that could both pay for mine and my wife's personal financials, our bills and such, and then have enough left over so that I could do some of the work I wanted to in the community. And so that's what we did. We got started in 2017, flipped some houses, bought some rentals, and as of 5 months ago, quote unquote, retired so we can put all of our attention on our foundation.
Dude, that's awesome because that's a short time frame. I mean, you did this in what, 3.5 years, whatever the exact number of days are. That's usually something that is not accomplished in a lifetime, and probably hard to accomplish in a typical W-2 career type environment, because with the W-2 stuff, you only get paid when you show up, which is a huge time suck. Mm-hmm. So you were able to get super intentional about this process and get to a point where, I think a lot of us want to be is, not trading time for money and then using your time for the things that mean the most to you. So this wasn't, a complete numbers game for you. I want to be taking pictures in front of my Bentley on the gram, and it wasn't a wealth number. It had to be a wealth number a little bit to get, because you got to get your bills paid. but it wasn't, completely, I need a stack of cash.
No, totally.
You know,
Um, Yeah, so there has to be, and everybody who does this knows this. To have clearly defined goals is like one of the first steps you have to do to accomplish pretty much anything. Unless you're satisfied just kind of breezing through life, which some people are. That's great. I've never been that person. So when I sat down, what I was thinking, so when I sat down in January of 2017, I was thinking, how much money do I need to bring in? Because you have to have that clearly defined goal, because that determines what side of real estate you go in. Like, you're never going to bring in, $5 million cash flow a year doing single family houses. I mean, you can, it'll take the rest of your life to do that. It's just a waste of time. So if that was my goal, I would have gone a different direction. But I wanted something that was very simple, very easy to manage, limited number of properties, very localized. And the number that I came to was $100,000 a year. I said, I want to cash flow after all reserves, after everything is, everything, $100,000 a year. And the idea was to come up with a very specific benefit that I wanted to do to our community. So we live in an area called the Tri-Cities. There are 3 cities, Bristol, Kingsport, Johnson City. They're all right around here. And I was specifically thinking of, okay, within that, what is the largest cause of suffering that I can think of? And the one that came to my mind was, okay, it's going to be in factory farming in some capacity. So I was digging a little bit deeper. And it came into chicken farming and egg laying hens, specifically within the Tri-Cities. Okay, now that's super, super specific. And I don't know anything about that. I didn't at the time. So instead I was like, what could somebody do if they had $100,000 a year that they could leverage, with other donations, things like that? You can turn $100,000 into $200,000 or $300,000 a year. And what could I do to change the industry in my area for that particular product? And I was like, well, actually you could do quite a bit. I mean, at the worst case scenario, you can create your own chicken farm, and hire somebody else to manage and everything. You just, be the financial partner. Worst case scenario, or there's a lot more effective strategies you can use as well. So having that very clearly defined why, and then a very clearly defined amount of money that I had to bring up to generate, help me figure out exactly what side of real estate that I wanted to go into. And then of course you've got all the things like your personal aptitudes, your personal skills, what kind of risk that you're willing to take, and those things, and all that plays into it. But you figure out a lot of that as you're going along.
Yeah, this is the classic reverse engineering.
Yeah.
Figure out where you want to go and then kind of work backwards. And did you chunk it up into time blocks? Did you look at it quarterly or half a year? Or I'm just curious, because you're very intentional. We'd see each other at the coffee shop and stuff, and you're always into, more efficient systems and things like that. So we can talk about that a little bit more. I know you did things like you got your real estate license, not only probably because it helped you grow your business, but it actually throws off a supplemental income stream within the business that you've already determined you want to be involved in. So you've kind of maximized a lot along the way in a very short time. So we could talk about that a little bit. I think you did some stuff with local banks and lines of credit and things like that. How did you, that was a lot there that I just kind of threw out there to talk about, but so you did 1 or 2 houses. What was your next step? Had you done the reverse engineering at that point, and now you did you blueprint at that point after 2 houses, and then really start on the execution side of it?
Yeah. Okay. So I had done a couple of houses, and in that process, on the tail end of the first house and the second house, one of my brothers jumped on and started helping me. He has a construction background, kind of like my dad was in metal stud framing and drywall. And so growing up, we were around it, even if we didn't actually work in construction. I mean, we pretty handy, did things around the house, that kind of thing. So my brother's pretty good at this. And so he jumped on, he was helping me a little bit at the beginning there. So come January 2017, really sat down, figured out what the goal is, and then started working back. I was like, okay, how do I want to get there? Now, we have very limited financial resources at this time. Okay, so first step is, well, we need to get some money. So just exactly that, create all of the little steps and actually write down every single little step. I need to generate, whatever it was at the time, I forget, $100,000 in investments from private investors. I need to pair that with a bank that will allow me to do a line of credit cash out refi within so many weeks of purchase, because our turnaround, I was expecting it turned out to be pretty quick. At our height in last year, 2019, I think our total turnaround time was a little bit less than 3 months from the day we purchased a property to the day it was sold. And that includes time on market, which for flippers is actually pretty good, because houses sit on market for at least a month and a half, even if it goes under contract day one. And that's assuming no, houses fall out of contract or anything like that, which they do on occasion. So yeah, just specifically figured out all those steps, and then just methodically, went through and hit each one of those. And it's not always a pretty experience. I mean, a guy who had not a very good credit score, because I'd always done like kind of teaching jobs here and tutoring jobs there and this and that. Very little savings to speak of, very little experience. How do you convince a bank to give you, a large line of credit? And you can do it. You just have to meet with a lot of people and be excited, pitch them on it, and show that you know more about that industry and more about their market than they know, and that any other investor they work with know. So that was kind of my goal, just to know more than everybody else. And then when you try to exhibit that, it goes across very well, especially when you're dealing with private investors. They really like dealing with somebody who seems like they know what they're talking about and are excited about doing it.
I mean, if you don't mind, can we put this into real numbers a little bit? Because I think that's important for people that are trying to get into this to see what that success looks. I mean, how many houses did you flip? If you don't mind talking about, what's actually in your portfolio as to how much you own. I think it's valuable for people to see, like, man, in 3 years he did X a number of flips, and he held on to this many. So if you don't mind talking about that, that'd be awesome.
All right. No, totally. It's going to take me just a second to try to do a little bit of counting.
He's going to need a calculator. This is how impressive this is going to be. He's going to have to carry the one.
No. So it starts small, and then, but if you just roll all your profit back in. So I think, after deciding to really go full time with it, that was 2017. We probably flipped. I'm just going to guess 5 houses, and maybe put 1 or 2 in service as rentals. And these were houses, the ones I put in service as rentals are ones, they were some of the really good deals, bought it, renovated it. It was worth significantly more than we had in it, and then did a cash out refi, then used a little bit of that extra to, again, roll it back into the company. So we probably did about, I guess 5 to 7 that year. 2018, we probably did 10, maybe a little bit more, and then we put another probably 5 or so houses, rentals into service. 2019, I think we did something like 30 or 35 rentos overall. Probably 20 or so of those were flips, and the rest of them were rental houses. As of right now, our portfolio, we have about 30 single-family rental properties, just in mine and my wife's name. My brothers, they have some as well that they've also picked off as we've gone through. So it's a bigger picture than just us, because my brother started working with me. And so we kind of treated it like a partnership after a little while. And so now they're taking some of the properties and doing their own things with them. So it's funneling a lot of different portfolios at the moment. But yeah, I would say probably 20 or so flips last year. This year, of course, with the coronavirus, stuff happened. Actually, our local market, just like most markets actually, didn't take a severe hit. You could flip right through it, but I was a little anxious about it. And so we pulled back pretty heavily, and we just kind of simmered through. So I think we flipped maybe 12 so far this year, and we put in service maybe another 7 or 8 rentals total, which sounds like a lot, but with the kind of upward path that we were climbing, it really was, we put the brakes on and just kind of plateaued and just let it simmer. And we'll see what it does for the rest of this year before we decide what we want to do. I'm not very heavily involved in it at this point. I've hired in one of my brothers as a manager who's doing most of what my job was. And so I just give final approval on the purchase side. They'll send me a video. I look at it and I say yes or no. And that's pretty much it. Run company meetings once a week.
So how many people are on the team? Oh, go ahead, Darren.
No, he just answered the question that was in my mind. I was about to ask is, like, as of 5 months ago, basically you are now totally not involved, but you have worked on your business enough with systems and processes to get you where you are. Man, this is so freaking cool that you've done it that fast. This is going to make some people just like ready to run through a brick wall. They're flipping houses, I swear. I just think it's, and I flipped a few houses as well, and it was always, I did a couple as well where I knew when I renoed them, I'm like, you know what, this is going to work out as a single family rental for right now. And then when I sell it a year and a half, 2 years later, bam, you just roll it back into another one. Anyway, I'm totally resonating with what you put in place. You had that number, reverse engineered it. I just, congratulations.
Yeah, I mean those are impressive numbers. I mean in the Tri-Cities area, we're not the biggest metropolis in most of the world. So to accomplish that here, maybe has something to say with perhaps there's a little bit less competition than there might be in some other markets, but I'm not trying to discount the amount of work that you put into it. Every market is a little bit different, but to have those kind of numbers, you have to be very intentional about the band of, the sales price that you're going to be in. I mean, you're doing some what I would consider, very bread and butter type stuff. You're I think very intentional about your entry and exit points and of course all the expenses along the way. So to do those kinds of numbers, you have to look at a ton of deals. You have to have the confidence and the comfort level to say yes a lot. And the systems to do those kinds of numbers in 3 years, that's impressive, dude. That's
well, I appreciate that.
You gotta write your next book.
Has the majority of the homes you purchase, the way you've sourced them, been through marketing, been through word of mouth, been through auction? How have you gotten the leads on most of those places?
Yeah, well, it's changed as the market has shifted. So, 3 years ago, there wasn't a lot of competition. There was some competition. And we were taking almost exclusively MLS deals. And we were taking the stuff at the bottom of the barrel. The other investors didn't want them because they needed significantly more work, things like that. And I was willing to take the risk and get in there and do that. Now, almost exclusively either word of mouth. We have quite a bit of that. We have, and direct to seller. So we'll have, for example, like 2 houses we just listed a couple weeks ago. Right side by side, same thing. One guy, it was some direct marketing, pulled him in, and then he told his neighbor who wanted to sell a house, was like, hey, these guys are great. They come over here, they gave me a fair price on it. They didn't even look under the house. Like they just said, hey, I'll buy it, and they walked out. And so
Yeah, it'll come back.
hey, this is what we can pay you. If you sell it on the market, this is what you'll get. This is how much you'll pay in agent fees. If you try to sell it yourself through Craigslist, this is what's going to happen. Just being very open and honest about it. And they were like, yeah, I think we just want to sell it to you. I was like, great, we'll give you some money in a couple of weeks. So that's mostly what it is.
Because that is such the benefit of, even a modest level of success will start to bring in the referral type business. The people that they want to. You've done somebody right. They like, know, and trust you, and they're willing to bring other people in that you may not be reaching because you've done proof of concept. You were fair, you were authentic, you were transparent, you delivered on what you said you were going to do, and ultimately, of course, it's an exchange of value. They left the transaction happy. Mm-hmm. And they're willing to tell other people about it. I mean, that's where the perseverance side of this business, and really any business, I think, is, if you can plug along long enough so that you can have that referral business, that's huge. It saves you a lot of work. And you're seeing stuff that nobody else is going to see. You're not in competition at that point. If somebody gives you a referral, you just have the luxury of saying yes or no.
Yeah, and that's absolutely necessary at this point because the competition here is, as of about a year ago, just exploded. We had lots of investors coming in from Knoxville, lots of investors coming over from Asheville, and they're used to paying significantly higher prices, and they just priced almost every local operation out of the market. There was only like 2 or 3 of us, actually, of sizable companies that actually stuck in because we were willing to compete with them, and the profit margin shrunk dramatically. And so at that point, you just can't be competing directly with people. It's just not feasible any longer. We'll see what happens in another year or so. Coronavirus, economic situation. We'll see what happens. Maybe they'll retreat back to their home markets, but I don't see that happening. Actually, they've already got a foothold here. I think they're going to stay.
Yeah, and we see that on the multifamily side. It's so hard to compete at the retail level because all, for the same reasons, money's chasing yield. You look at entry level pricing around here compared to a lot of bigger markets. They're like, what? I can get stuff for whatever, 60, 70,000 a door and it cash flows. So they're willing to take what we would consider a haircut on returns, and they're perfectly happy with it. It's just a different business model, and sometimes it's hard to compete, to try and accomplish your returns projections or whatever standard you have. It does get difficult. So it's nice either to go direct to seller or have some kind of other avenue for deal flow.
Well, let me ask one more question, if you don't mind. Most of the time, someone with your success in the single family realm, whether it's flips in your exact business model, the natural progression is generally multifamily. But you've done so much in such a short period of time. Is that even something you would consider in the future or have thought about? What are your thoughts on it in general?
Oh, totally. Yeah. So that's interesting. So some people in real estate see this as almost like an evolutionary progression, right? You start, wholesaling, you make a little bit of money, then you flip, make a little more money, do a couple single family rentals, sell that portfolio, buy some multifamily or mobile home park, or, get in commercial. And that's not a natural evolution actually, but it's a very good story that's been sold that way. I have no interest in multifamily. My single families. So when I did the numbers with our particular area, I discovered that I needed 15 free and clear single family houses to cash flow that 100,000 a year. I actually cash flowed like 99,000 some change. I was like, I need 15 free and clears. If I am personally paying a property manager, how many properties can a property manager who works just for me, not like a company, how many could they actually take care of? And I was like, actually, with a single family space, they can probably take care of about 45 or so. I was like, okay. So I can, just generate, 35, 40, 45 properties, hire a property manager to manage it, plenty of cash flow left over at the end of the day. So I wanted to stick with the single families. It's interesting because my number one competitor in the area is a really good guy. We see each other all the time. We laugh, we cut up. Because if you're going to compete with people, you got to have a friendly face on it. Otherwise, it's just not pleasant. And he was doing the same thing. He was doing a little bit of multifamily, a little bit of single family, and he decided that he just hated it. He just wanted to flip, and he makes a lot of money flipping. I don't know how much he makes nowadays, but he used to make a lot of money flipping. So when we had the flipping company going, we had all of these different avenues trying to pull as many properties in as possible. And then they were put in different buckets. Several of the properties we would just sell direct to other investors. We're like, hey, this needs X amount of work. We'd be happy to do it, but there's so many other investors out here who wants them. And we would just wholesale to them. We never wholesaled a house. We would always just buy it. It would sit in the pipeline. And when we got too many backed up, we'd sell 2 or 3 off to other investors. We flipped some, and then the rest of them we put into turning the rental properties. So yeah, I like the single family rental. I like that if you want to finance them, you can do them individually. If you want to sell them off, you can do it individually. I like that my tenants really don't like staying less than 2 years. I like that they move all their stuff in and they get cozied up, and as long as they're financially able to keep making the rent payments, they keep paying them. Flip side of that, obviously, is when we have a tenant move out, we almost always have to bring in a construction dumpster and load up a bunch of stuff because they leave behind tons of things, unlike in apartments. But no, I've been very satisfied with the single family space. And I think it's because I didn't want to grow and expand. So like if I really wanted to be the most successful real estate investor in this area, I would not do it with single families. I would wrap up my portfolio right now. I'd, sell it off. And then I would go into something larger. But that's really not what I'm trying to do. And I have no interest in spending the next 5 to 10 years of my life attempting to do that. I have much more important things to do for myself than seek a bunch of money and do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I love that because it's like I like the stay in your lane type mentality because you found something you're comfortable with, you reverse engineered it, the plan worked. There's no reason for you to change, and there's an opportunity cost to trying to relearn another aspect of real estate. Whereas you can have some success and continue to do really well in single family residential. I won't speak for you. I know, we're focused on apartments, and I really like knowing that well. I also, do know a bit about mobile home parks enough that if somebody that I like, know, and trust has a deal that they bring to me and need some help with it, and I have the ability to invest with it, then I would be comfortable going into other asset classes without necessarily having to be the main operator. So I was just throwing
I
that
think
out.
another advantage that you have created for yourself is control by this model.
Yeah.
Because generally in multifamily, especially larger, financially, you can't do that by yourself. You can't take down 50 or more by yourself, generally speaking. Most people, majority of people. So I think that's another big thing is control. If you want to pivot, you see something where you'll change your business model, or like you're saying, I don't have to ask anybody if I want to sell that rental I've had for 2 years, whatever the case be. Yeah, I think it's great. Stay in your lane mentality, as Greg said.
No,
Are
totally.
you self-managing? You are self-managing right now, right?
Not me personally. We have a manager who just works for me, and so she manages our portfolio. We pay her full time. I mean, she's an independent contractor, but we pay her the equivalent of like a full-time salary. But she doesn't have full time's worth of work right now. But that was part of the deal. I was like, hey, come on, learn this. We'll help you along the process. And we're going to be slowly adding on properties. Once we get to the point that you can't manage them anymore, that's fine. We'll figure out something at that point.
Yeah, because I mean, having management in-house, even though you're not the one doing showings and deciding whether the hole in the wall is big enough to charge them for damages, it gives you a ton of flexibility for implementing change. If you have a third-party property, there's trade-offs. If you have a third-party property manager that has hundreds of houses, it's very difficult for you to go into their office and say, I'd like to implement this change in your screening criteria starting Monday. You probably get some pushback on that because they don't want a business plan for every individual owner. So by keeping it in-house, you're able to maintain a high level of flexibility in your business plan, but at the same time, you've designed it so that you're a manager of managers rather than the property manager as well. So
totally. And it's what you're saying goes right to what Darren was saying, and that I completely agree with, is that just my personality, I have just always been the person who really likes control, and there's a lot of downsides to it, but there's also a lot of positives to it. And so that's why I chose this particular asset class. That's why I chose in-house management. It's why my partner, my brother, who is now like my pretty much a 50-50 partner at this point, he does his job very well, but he trusts me to make all the other decisions. I make acquisitions decisions. Well, I used to. Now I'm just kind of helping a little bit. But financing decisions, fundraising decisions, all those kinds of things, it was just me. And so personality goes into this a lot. If you're somebody who doesn't mind sharing with another partner and really having equal say with somebody else, maybe a different asset class is better. Maybe a different tactic is better. If you're somebody like me who really likes to control everything that's going on, I found that, the path that I took was very satisfying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, personally, not only did it reach your financial goals, it sounded like you enjoyed being in the process as well. It wasn't a drag.
Oh, no, so that's what's really difficult about it is, so real estate is putting together puzzles. Okay, so especially in the early days when you don't have much money, you don't have a lot of deal flow, and you don't really know what color paint to use or what kind of tile to put here. I mean, there's thousands of decisions to make this really an optimized. You're talking about systems earlier. We can get into that if you want to. But like every little aspect of our flipping company is standard. It's very well researched. We know exactly our demographic. We know what different demographics expect, different price points. It's very clearly laid out. There's no like, oh, I think this is pretty. That has never came across my mind. And I will never do that. Looking at an old house and think, oh, this old house is really cool. No. If I ever think that, I should walk away from that project. Or
just call us. We'll talk you out of it.
No. I know that we looked at a property. I thought I was walking around with you. It's been several months ago, and it was a cool older house. And in my mind, I was just thinking, there's no way I'd ever touch this. It's too unique. It's too cool.
It's fun to think about,
Yep.
Yeah.
I totally lost train of thought where I was going with all that. Yeah, I don't remember. We'll come back to it.
That's fine. No worries.
So I think, real quick, I think that I want to know if you have thought about writing a second book now through your success, and maybe even touching on the first one a little bit, kind of bringing it up to where you are now? And then if you want to, at this time, tell us a little bit more about the thought process behind your foundation and what your plans are for that, or what your goals are for that, I guess.
Yeah, totally. As far as writing another book, I'm kind of torn on it. One, the hubris of thinking that you know enough that's gonna put better quality information in that book than all these other great books that are already out there that everybody already knows about. It's pretty high. But I think I do have some unique perspectives to say, particularly when you're talking about, smaller America, rural America, those kinds of things. The first book that I wrote back in my early 20s it basically said that, hey, at that point, that was all I knew. It was like, hey, there are two basic ways of financial freedom. One is to reduce expenses and lead a very environmentally friendly, conscious life. And then, work, 5 or 10 hours a week or so, strategic work to pay the rest of your bills. And I lived that way. Me and my wife lived that way until, 2016. That's why we had, $3,000. But we always paid our bills and stuff. We were very satisfied, but we didn't have a lot of wealth and then no, retirement plan or insurance or that kind of thing. That wasn't part of the plan, right? And then the other side would be to generate, passive cash flow, which is infinitely more sexy. Everybody likes that one. Because that's the one that you get to buy all your fancy gadgets with, and you get to go traveling and do all those kinds of things. And you can also combine these two, which I think there's a lot to be said for that. The first book I wrote was just on that one side. It was like, hey, here's how to reduce your expenses. Nothing groundbreaking. The second side also wouldn't be groundbreaking. It was, this is how to clearly define how much money you need and how to generate that in cash flow. I know real estate fairly well. I don't know a lot of other business models. I'll kick around the idea for another couple of years. When I get bored, we'll see what happens. But I don't know. I like the podcast format or something like that a little bit better. So
there you go. Yeah. Well, I think there'd be value because I know you're interested in educating, the younger crowd. I'm not sure exactly if you've got an age bracket that you're focusing on, but putting some of this entrepreneurial real estate stuff into the context of something that maybe somebody that doesn't have a lot of foundational stuff in business. I think that's like a gap that needs to be filled somehow, figuring out how to communicate. Because for me, Darren and I talk about it, a lot of this is execution, and this execution is just, following through on the business plan, which is hard. It's a lot of, you've worked very hard. I don't think people realize how much time and effort it takes to do those kind of numbers that you were doing. Super time consuming, even if you're, the project manager. I've been doing a lot of air quotes lately. The project manager or not necessarily swinging the hammer. There's still a ton of work that goes into this.
Oh, totally. So just on the work side, just to kind of give people perspective, I come from a bit of a workhorse family. And so it took me 3.5 years, but literally I worked 7 days a week.
Yeah.
I would normally start working. I would wake up, pull up my phone, still laying in bed. I would start with my to-do list, and I literally worked all day long. And then when I went to bed, I was on my phone. This is super unhealthy, by the way. I should never have done it this way. I would much rather have it taken 5 years and lived a decent lifestyle in that time period. But that's not the way I went about it. And it was just working constantly as hard as possible. Applying the 80-20. I don't want to throw out a bunch of jargon to people. Don't want to spend too much time explaining it, but applying the 80-20 principle to really make sure that what I was doing is the most efficient thing for what my goals actually are. Make sure I'm shooting at the right target, so to speak, and that I'm using the correct ammunition. So doing a lot of that, systematizing as much as possible, but just as far as hours in, it was a lot, which puts a lot of strain on a relationship. It puts a lot of strain on your connection to, yourself and your family and your identity. It's like we were talking about earlier. I produce cookie cutter houses. No joke. Before I started this, I live in the apartment complex, and there were 2 subdivisions. They were right before that apartment complex. One was called something estates. Every house looked the same. $200,000 houses. Everyone looked exactly the same. Literally, the next subdivision was called Garden Way, and the houses were made out of old barns, and they're just cool houses, cool designs. And I used to always drive by and chuckle at the cookie cutter community, and then I would drive by the other one, and I was like, oh, that is so inspiring, And I have never produced a unique and inspiring property because financially, doesn't make as much sense for what I was trying to accomplish. So I produced cookie cutter houses, which means I used cookie cutter tile, cookie cutter colors, cookie cutter, windows, everything. And what that does over time is it changes your perspective, how you think about the world and how you see your place in it. When you're dealing with bankers and insurance agents and the head of HOAs and real estate agents. Those are a very particular type of people. And if that's who you interact with all the time, if you don't have enough time on the side to really keep in touch with who you are and what your values are, it's easy to fall 100% into that, more superficial, more concerned with, what HGTV is putting out mentality than something that's a little bit more authentic to yourself. So that's a really cool thing I'm experiencing right now. It's kind of like a rejuvenation of a more authentic version of myself. Sounds a little quirky, but it's totally
No,
true.
that's fine, man. I love that. Let's get into that side of it a little bit more, Darren, because I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Well, I'll make one more comment about what he just said is you have taken the emotion out of business, and you have to do that, especially in this business. If you can't, on every side, from purchase to rehab to finishes to property management to investors, you have to take the emotion out of it. So I just want to make that comment. That's exactly what you just said in a different way.
Yep, totally.
Because, Darren and I, we do, maybe our limited audience knows, we do a fair amount of self-development. I mean, how do you approach that in your day-to-day? Do you meditate? When you're reading books, is it real estate, or is it Think and Grow Rich, or is it or something else? How do you approach the the mental health side, or just feeding yourself the right kind of because what you focus on is what manifests itself in the world. I really believe that, because, when I wake up in a bad mood, I tend to have a bad day. When I wake up and get work done, I tend to get work done because that's what I'm focusing on. So.
Oh, totally. Yeah, that one's an exciting one because the human mind, people know this, it's no secret. The human mind is so good at replicating what you put in front of it. If you watch scary movies over and over, guess what? You dream about those. And you have a little more anxiety when you're out at night in the city and things like that. If you, read books on meditation and grounding and feeling connected to the community and nature, well, guess what? You walk around and you feel connected. So that's what's so exciting about that is it's not hard to change what's going on inside your head. You just have to expose yourself to it, and enough exposure, your mind just starts to replicate it on its own. That's why when you meet with like a new group of people and all of a sudden you realize you're starting to speak like them and you didn't mean to, your speech patterns change. And that's the same kind of thing. You're just replicating your surroundings. So I'm getting all sidetracks again.
No, you're good.
How I do it. Yeah, so how I do it is I've never been very good at balance. It's always been one of the things that I value the most is just balance in your life, balancing, work and family and your connection to nature and whatever else that you put in there. But I've never been good at that. I've always been good at picking one thing and doing that one thing to the exclusion of all else. So when I was doing real estate heavily, I was reading real estate. I was reading tax law. I was, became more knowledgeable than my CPA. I have more knowledge than my CPA on all this stuff. I was telling her what she should be doing. Just learning all the different aspects of that. So again, that's not very balanced, but it does produce somebody who's very honed in on their section of real estate and can be very effective, very efficient. But now that I've kind of set it to the side, going back to I meditate every morning, not long, about 5 minutes or so. I had a conversation I did a study abroad in a Tibetan refugee community in Kathmandu, Nepal, back when I was in college. And I was living in a monastery there. And one of the monks, I was talking with him, speaking in English, luckily. And I was asking him, like, oh, how do you meditate? And he was like, meditate? Like, what are you talking about? This is a Tibetan monk. And I was like, no, I'm like, how do you meditate? And he was like, oh, or I was asking him how long. And he was like, 5, 10, 15 seconds. I was like, what are you talking about, 5, 10, 15 seconds? But he explained it to me. He's like, it's not about how much time you spend sitting there. Now, this is a particular type of meditation, obviously. He was like, it's about that instant clarification and just letting that stillness sit and doing that multiple times throughout the day. Do it 30 or 50 times throughout the day. You get in your car, take a deep breath, stillness. Then you go on about your day. And said what that does is it resets your basic mode of operation to be one of more calm-minded, wider perspective. So I'm trying to re-engage with that a little bit. It's a slow go because I spent the last 3 years working as quickly and fast as possible, but I'm excited about it. So a little bit of that in the morning. Don't really want to start anything before 10:30. Today's an exception. Normally I get up when I feel like it, tea on the front porch with my wife, do a little bit of meditation, do a little bit of read and studying, particularly in Eastern philosophy. I do quite a bit of that, and then go on about my day, whatever that looks like.
Right on. I like the intuitive side of some of what you talked about there. because I'll find during my day, try and get my most important deep work type stuff done in a block, stay away from distractions, get stuff done. And then sometimes I'm just tired. And it used to be that I would power through it somehow. But it would end up being time spent doing something dumb, like thumbing the phone on social media. I would take a break that really wasn't a break because I would look at the news, or I would, instead now much more time that I spend not working is either just going for a walk or sitting quietly. Or if I'm tired, you know what? I'm going to just close my eyes for 15 minutes. I know I'm not going to fall asleep for 4 hours. I'm just going to let myself naturally recharge. So, I like the intuitive side of living a little bit more than I gave it credit, a couple of years ago. Because, Kim's my wife, for those listening. When I say Kim, that's who I'm talking about. We're talking about, like, what did we do before? One of it is we had kids, so we were very busy. We were doing stuff at school. We didn't have a lot of downtime. But with, owning and running a business, there can be a tendency to work all the time because there is usually something that needs to be done. And a lot of it is completely dependent upon you or one of your partners or somebody very close to the business doing it. So there can be a tendency to feel like, I just need to have to work all the time, and being able to shut it off is very important.
No, it's an important skill, and it's one that I never quite mastered. I know people who do master it, and they'll do something like, leisurely morning, 10:30 a.m. They start, and when they start, they hit it hard, and they just complete focus for 10 or 15 minutes, because that's all you're going to focus anyway. You have to be really trained to actually focus for 15 minutes. You focus for 15 minutes, then stand up, take a 30-second stretch break, sit down, 15 more minutes, hit it hard. And just do that for about 3 hours, and all of a sudden, boom, you've done a day's worth of work in 3 hours. I've never been the best at that. Some people really are. Yeah, I forget where I was going after that.
Well, I think you're just maybe touching on strategies. There's lots of strategies to do work effectively. Find the one that works and just stick with it. It might take a little bit of bouncing around to figure out, because you hear, I get up at 3:30 and I do this until whatever, and then the next 22 minutes I am doing this, and it can be very regimented. And I've tried some of that. I'm like, nah, this ain't working. So try another variation and be like, oh, okay, I'm getting some traction. And I feel like, when I look at my to-do list, it's getting knocked out. At the end of the day, I'm satisfied with the amount of work that I've done. It's 5:30. I don't feel like I have a bunch of stuff still weighing on my head that has to be done right now. I can just chill. I can have dinner.
I think there's a lot to be said for that. The whole get up early, your best work hours in the morning. That may be true for most people, and it may be true for me, but I've tried to do that for 12 years, and it's made me miserable. I'm not a morning person. I used to decide jobs based on what I was allowed to wear and when I had to get up, which didn't work so well as a teacher, I'll just tell you. So I learned that, no, that doesn't work so well for me. So I've been getting up pretty much when I want to over the last, 3 years. When I say when I want to, within reason, 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning is kind of what I'm shooting for. And then just working a little bit later at night. And some people say oh, that's not efficient. You shouldn't do that. It's perfectly fine. It's whatever's good for you.
It's my day, man.
Own your day.
What I want.
Is it their book called that? Own Your Day? Something like that.
Probably. But yeah, I'm just, 9 o'clock. This guy's grabbing a book and going to bed. I get emails from people at 1:30 in the morning. Well, I'm like, I don't understand that. That's just not me. But I'm much better at 6 o'clock in the morning than I am at 11 o'clock at night in terms of getting things done.
Yep. So yeah,
I want to
go ahead.
Shoot some more questions at me. Let's get into some of the exciting.
I want to tell us let's move on to your foundation, if you don't mind. Tell us the name of it, the purpose of it, why you started it, what the goals are for it. If your wife's involved, all of the above about what drives Jesse to have this
Well, yeah, let me
Um,
jump in because I want to like give the backstory of this. Jess and I would see each other walking around downtown Johnson City, usually at the coffee house or something. We'd go there and steal Wi-Fi, get some work done. We used to see each other at the outdoor concerts pre-COVID, when a lot more stuff was happening outside. So we were walking around and we see them like, hey, what's up? We started chit-chatting and we got into this conversation. You started talking about, oh, I'm going to start working on my foundation. And immediately I'm like, I don't even know what that means. I know what, I've heard foundation. I'm like, what could that possibly mean? And um, I realized, you had the education background, you got out of that, and we talked about this pre-recording. It's like, I think you still consider yourself an educator, but you found the vehicle being real estate, hit it hard, had success, and now you're doing what you really want to spend your time doing, having solved the ever-present financial challenge for anybody that lives in a capitalistic society. You need money.
Yeah.
You need some level of money to go about your day. So yeah, talk about the foundation and
Oh, yeah.
how you got to the point where it's like, yeah, you know what, I need to start a foundation.
No, totally. Okay, so I'll start off saying that I didn't know it would be a foundation. When I
Okay.
first started back a few years ago, 3 years ago, my mind was more of, hey, I can have, this money coming in and maybe I can do some type of like grants to existing businesses to encourage them to change their habits. Like, hey, I will pay for you to put windows into your chicken house if you just put them in, that kind of thing. So that's kind of what my mind was, grant-based stuff. So then I went to real estate. I've never really been much of a person to, I don't know. Some people, they get a lot of enjoyment. They get a lot of motivation by talking about what their end goal is. They'll meet somebody, another real estate investor, like, hey, I'm investing in real estate because I want to achieve X, Y, and Z. I've never been that person. I was like, I'm going to invest in real estate. So I'm just going to invest in real estate. And then we're going to talk real estate with these people. And we're going to enjoy putting together the puzzles of real estate. And then at the end, I can then do whatever it is that I was actually shooting to do. So I think it kind of surprised a lot of people when I was like, okay, I'm done. And they're like, what do you mean you're done? I'm like, oh, I'm done. And I'm ready to start my foundation. Like, what are you talking about? So when I was starting to slow down early 2020, I had to come back to the death of a businessman birthday party. Remind me to come back to that. That was a good one. But so it was getting close to my 30th birthday, which was this past April. And I was thinking, okay, now, if we got a little bit of cash flow coming in, I've got a company and got some managers in place who, with a little bit more training, will be able to run things with little oversight. And then I had to this was a difficult part, emotionally separate myself from the business. What happens if the flipping company completely goes belly up at this point because I'm not running it? I've got to be okay with that. I'm making the choice. I can manage the managers and trust the managers, and the managers may make a horrible purchasing decision. All it takes is 2 or 3 of those in a row, and all of a sudden, you're out $500,000. So just making sure that I am okay letting go of that. So kind of did that and exploring a little bit of, nonprofits, foundations. I didn't even know really what a foundation was, but I realized it's an amazing vehicle. Okay, so there's different ways you can have a foundation. You can have a board where multiple people are responsible for the foundation decisions, or you can have a trustee. I'm the trustee. I have my own foundation. I am the sole trustee, which means I choose what happens with that money. It's called the Mountain Laurel Foundation. Mountain laurel because we have a particular type of bush tree in this area called the mountain laurel. And I grew up in an area called Shelton Laurel. So I was like, oh, it's very, endemic to the area. It's very local and personal to me. And it's vague enough that you can have multiple programs going on underneath it and it doesn't cause any concerns. Most foundations have somebody's name attached to them. You think of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or so on and so forth. And the foundation is created as a way for wealthy individuals to put money into an entity that is then going to distribute that money. Most foundations distribute it in forms of grants to nonprofits. So say, okay, I really want to encourage, malaria vaccine research. And so this nonprofit up here is doing that. So they're going to apply and I'm going to give them X amount of money. And so that's what a foundation typically is. Now, these are for people who have lots of money. Okay. I don't have a lot of money, but there's another type of foundation called the private operating foundation, which says that any individual can give up to 60% of their AGI, of their adjusted gross income, as a tax write-off to a foundation if that foundation is operating its own programs. So what that means for me is I can give up to 60%, take 60% of our income, put it into the foundation, get a tax write-off for all that. Okay. And then once the money's in the foundation, I can use it for any of these programs we want to work on. And I don't care if it's in my personal bank account or the foundation's bank account, that doesn't matter a bit. And it also allows us, if we ever wanted to, we can raise money from other individuals. You know, we can do like matching grants, things like that for particular projects that we don't have the financial capability to really tackle. But yeah, as long as we stay relatively local, and as long as I'm able to apply the same systemic thinking and clearly define targets that I think I was able to do in the flipping world, and do that in with animal welfare and environmental conservation, then I think that we can be pretty impactful. So that's the goal. Yeah, what other questions do you have about that?
You're just like your flipping business and rental business. You identified and have perfected, in my opinion, a demographic and a model which works, and you know extremely very well. Now you're doing the same thing with this foundation. You're staying very local. You have a very targeted audience of who you want to help and how, or an area that you want to help. And I think just like mine shifted from what you're doing to create that cash flow, and now you're doing it. Am I on the right path? It sounds like what you've done.
100%. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. So the foundation has multiple branches. Now, none of these are actually filled out yet with functioning programs. We have programs outlined in a few of them, but we're going to take them one at a time, get them set up, get a manager in place to manage that program so I can go on to the next one. Again, systemically, because I don't want to be managing a ton of things right now. But for example, one of them that's really important to me is, how do I describe that? It's financial education is on the one end. For low-income students, low-income families in general, but also low-income students. So I come from a low-income family. All families significantly below the poverty line growing up. And a lot of people in our area are. Now, I don't want to have too much hubris in this, but I feel like I actually understand the low-income Appalachian family, at least in the Blue Ridge Mountains, fairly well, because that was me. I mean, I grew up back in the mountains, you know, no neighbors in the immediate vicinity or anything like that. It took us, 30, 45 minutes to get to the nearest grocery store. It took us 45 minutes to get to the grocery store. So, I mean, that was my life. So I understand that. And I understand a lot of the backgrounds these people have. I don't understand low-income families in Knoxville. That's 2 hours away, but I don't understand them. But I do understand the Blue Ridge. And so if I identify that, I'm saying, hey, there's all these high school students who they're graduating from high school, their parents had very poor financial literacy skills. Their high schools taught them nothing, okay? They need to know X, Y, and Z. How can I implement that in an efficient way? For example, I can do that. So financial education is one big one, and another big one that's a little separate from that is logical thinking ability. Reasoning skills are very poor in our area. Our public education system is doing a very poor job of doing that. It's expected to be a skill that you glean through other subjects. Like you go to English class and then you kind of glean what it means to have a rational conversation about something and logical thinking. And that's not a very efficient way of doing it. So if I can touch on those two things, for example, whether it be in after-school programs or whether it be in an intensive summer camp, with tuition waivers for low-income students, then yeah, that's what I want to do.
A couple of things I want to touch on. So it kind of goes back to what we talked about a little bit of staying in your lane. What you were talking about with your experience with the Blue Ridge Mountains is, I wrote a note, identifying by experience where you can affect change. So you're taking, something that you grew up with and are familiar with, distilling it, thinking about it, and then figuring out how you can apply that knowledge to affect change very locally, as opposed to going to Knoxville and reinventing the wheel with people who you think you may be able to help, possibly with some kind of what is it, savior complex, the hubris thing. I'm going to help because I can help. I just can. I know I'm such a good person. I can help these people and they will welcome me because I'm just willing to do it,
Totally. That's a lesson I learned in Nepal, actually. There was I was walking around, short story, but I was walking around the main street in front of the monastery that I was in. And, there's lots of starving people that's laying on the sidewalks. That was a bit of a, I don't know if you curse in this show, but it was a bit of a mind fuck. So these people
It's
laying.
fine. Our demographic is not 10-year-old.
Okay, I've been keeping myself. So literally starving people, they're just laying there on the sidewalk that I was stepping over, just poor people with injuries, no assistance programs to help these people. And the monasteries are the ones who step up and actually help them, right? Same function that churches used to, and in some ways still do, perform in the United States. So I remember one day this gentleman approached me. He spoke English, which is a little unusual, but okay, he spoke English. And we got into a conversation. I was going to get him to help me buy a shawl for my wife who was back in the States. And because he's local, he'll get a much better deal than me, the white guy walking up, would get. And so, he went and did that. And then he was going to take me back to his place. And so we go down this alleyway, and it's just trash. And I remember looking at all these little giblets of trash. I was like, oh, come on, why doesn't somebody, take a little bit of pride of ownership and clean up this thing? And then we turned a corner. And what I saw was probably 50, 60 families who were living. The best of these houses were 4 bamboo poles with a tarp over top. And that was the best of them. And inside you had just filthy blankets and just filth. The water that they were drinking out of was a big pool of water. It was just mud. It was just mud water. And they were scooping it up in glasses, going there and then boiling it on little cook fires inside their houses. And so there's nothing shocking about that. We've heard of these stories. But when you see that, and then I look to the left, and there is obviously a fairly well-to-do American walking in, and he's acting like he owns the place. He's literally walking around like he is the stuff. And he's walking around, and he walks up to me, and he says, well, this guy's not trying to get you to give him money. He's like, well, we shouldn't give any money. We should do these programs that'll help them. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, guy. And he walks on. And then the Nepalese man that I was talking with looked at me, and he's like, I hate that guy. He's like, he treats us like trash. And I was like, oh, that is the savior complex. That's a guy who came in, knows nothing about Nepalese culture, and is like, hey, these people have less than me. Therefore, by the very fact that I have more than them, I know what they need. And I would really like to avoid that if at all possible. I know I've got some of it. Everybody's got some of it. It's hard to avoid, but try to limit it as much as possible.
Wow, that's great, man. That's such a, God, I don't even know how to describe it. That's had to have affected you now up until what you've done, just mentally.
Totally. It's hard to avoid it. And it's hard, it's really hard to put your resources at play, helping people locally, when you know that the amount of suffering they experience is a drop in the hat compared to the suffering that you visually experience somewhere else, but also knowing that you don't have the background information to know what is best there, but you may have a better idea of what's best locally. So it's a bit of a conflict. I've chosen to go locally just because I can visually see what I'm doing and the results of that. And I feel good about it, but there's a good argument to be made for going the other direction. I just feel more comfortable staying local.
What you just described, in my mind, is our federal government wasting money on whatever program because they truly don't know. They just think they're helping by throwing money at it. That's a perfect example. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get off on that. But, yeah.
Yep. Let me point out, I think your approach to your foundation is probably very similar to your approach to real estate, and maybe that could be your book subject matter, is somehow you're applying the same drive and systems and processes and figuring out priorities and reverse engineering, and those kind of strategies can be super successful in so many different domains. And what you did in real estate, now you're applying to your foundation. I just hearing as you're speaking, you're kind of approaching the two things the same way, as almost like a mechanical process or an engineering process. It's like, okay, here's my goal, here's where I'm starting, here's the chunks out steps that I need to get here, here's where we'll take a look, we'll analyze, we'll evaluate, we'll make adjustments. we'll try things to see if they get any traction. We'll back off, then we'll stick to the 20% and compound those. So maybe that's something that you could talk about on your vlog or whatever you end up doing. You mentioned, remind me about the death of a businessman birthday party.
Oh yeah. So this was pre-corona. It was going to be amazing. And of course they shut us down. But so my 30th birthday was at the end of April. And I, again, while doing real estate, never really celebrated anything. It was kind of like if somebody said, oh, for example, I've got a friend who was, every time he asks, like, well, how many houses do you own now? And I'll tell him, and he's really like impressed. He's like, oh, that's so cool. And I'm thinking, please, my main competitor owns 250 rental houses. I've got nothing. Okay. And so having that perspective, while it is very encouraging in some ways and it really propels you, it can also be self-defeating. So I was like, you know what? It's been, 3-4 years of this. It's time to be proud of what I've accomplished. And so planned this birthday party. I was going to call it the death of a businessman party, where, kind of marking the exit from the for-profit world and the entry into the nonprofit world. And just invite all the friends and just really talk about the vision for the foundation. Just let the community know kind of what's going on and what I'm trying to accomplish here. I was super excited about it. Of course, Corona, like everything else, shut that down. So I'm actually just putting like a thumbtack in that and plan to come back to it if they opened up soon enough. I'll just have a belated, maybe a 31st birthday or something like that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I just love that. I love that you defined your goal, you approached it, and you're like, okay, now we're doing this.
And you have had to force yourself, which sounds like to me, based on I'm more of not balanced traditionally and just focus on one thing and go 100 miles an hour, knock it out of the park, great at it. Now you're having to mentally, hey, I'm no longer that person, and I'm having to, although it sounds to me like you're doing great. Hey, I get up when I want, start my day at 10:30 officially for whatever work needs to be done, sit the tea on the porch with my wife. Who's not gonna want that, right? So, but it sounds like still you have to maybe tone yourself down occasionally, have that break, whatever it is, to make sure you don't get back in that mode. Am I close in that at all?
You are 100% on the point. It has been 5 months of struggle. It's been 5 months of, like, it'll be fine. I'll be just reading. Like, I was reading a biography of Andrew Carnegie, and I'll just be reading, and then something in the book, I'm like, oh man, this guy was like the richest man in the world, and he did do X, Y, and Z. And I was like, holy crap, if I put in place this, and this in 10 years, I could be here. And then before I know it, 45 minutes later, I've made like a rough draft of a whole other business plan. I'm like, what am I doing? I need to read this back. There's value in that, but not the value that I want. And so it's an ongoing thing. Luckily, as time's going on, it's becoming less frequent. I'm only falling into that, that very like business-minded, very, busybody, let's hit it hard and fast, once every other day now. But it's still an integral part of what's going on in my head. So it's a challenge. I don't want to get rid of it entirely because it's very useful. It's a useful skill to have, but it can also be a skill that, if you're not careful, will define your life. And that's fine for people who that's what they're looking for, but not everybody's like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we talk about our business and very little of it, unless you've got some kind of contract thing going on that has a time frame or a timeline or a date. Very little of it is, very time sensitive. And what I mean by that is I don't have to do everything every day. I just need to define the things that are most important to what needs to be done every day. And some of the stuff can wait for the next day when it comes into the queue and is now the most important thing that needs to be done that day. I think there tends to be a very reactionary approach to running a business. An email popped onto my screen. I don't need to open that right now. I'm doing something else that yesterday I defined as my priority today. I don't need to let other things take precedent because they appeared in my peripheral vision over here. But I like the book stuff. I do a lot of reading too, and I've seen or heard some people criticize the serial readers. It's like, oh, why do people have to continually read books on how to start a real estate career? They've put one book down, they pick up the next book about it, and they never execute on it. They just become serial readers instead of executors. So you definitely do have to take action, but continuing to read, you might pick up a little nugget that made this guy become whatever, the United States' first billionaire, but it might just be an efficiency that I can bring in for what I'm doing. So constantly being able to expose yourself to how other people found sometimes massive success, can help you just grow whatever you're currently into without having to take over the world.
To Greg's point about the reading, and he mentioned earlier that, we've learned that most of what we do is all about execution mentally. It sounds to me like you've done this as well. You just basically made a commitment to what that number was for you 5 months ago and took action and figured out a lot of it along the way. Because what we learned is, and try to teach others, is you can't sit down and figure it all out and then go. You just got to go do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the path reveals itself. And you hear you could drive across the country with just your headlights on, by only seeing the next 75 feet in front of you. You get, as you go, the next step will reveal itself. You just have to continue to move forward and not necessarily, no, you're not going to have all the answers, and there's going to be stuff that you're never expected to happen, but just trust the process type mentality, that kind of thing.
I think there's a lot to be said for that, that way of approaching things. And it's true. I have a good real estate friend of mine who was doing a development project in downtown, and I was asking him, like, how can you even do this? Like, how can you manage these contracts and stuff? And this was back several years ago, and I could not even figure out how he started. And he was like, it's easy. The exact same analogy. His was a boat, and a misty lake. He's like, you just row, and you can always see 5 feet ahead of you. The flip side of that is also to stay well educated. Like you were saying with reading, I think it's really important. Even if the things that you haven't hit yet, stay well educated. Not like tax law, for example. Who wants to read that? I actually didn't enjoy that very much, and I love reading. But learning that, hey, well, if I transition this company into an S corp, have a tax as an X corp, this saves me this much on this kind of tax, and if I roll that in, that'll produce this kind of return over the next 12 months. And you just figure that out. Things you wouldn't have even thought about if you're not kind of having a more wide base to your education. So it's a little bit of both. You hear some people who say that you should learn one thing and do that one thing to the exclusion of all else, and you'll be very effective. That's true. But also to have a very wide base of knowledge helps you realize when you're doing that one thing and there's an issue, it helps you know exactly where to pivot and where you need to go, and then you can focus in that direction. So I can see it both ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you made the point that you have actually educated you were teaching your CPA, hey, this is actually what we should be doing. And Greg and I have learned in business together that it is all our decisions, and that just because someone's supposed to be an expert in the field, you are the final decision maker. And I don't care how long they've been doing it, for 30 plus years, no matter what it is, you ultimately are responsible, and you have to know that and make the right decision.
No, totally. So it's been about a year ago or so, I had my assistant calling different banks and asking what type of loan products they have for just asking about their loan products and things like that. And she put together a nice spreadsheet with all their answers, and I looked at them, and I realized that about a third of those mortgage loan officers did not know their job. And so I called those people, and I told them, I was like, hey, you said that there's a 10-house limit on how many properties you can own before we can package and sell this off. I was like, no, that's not true. There's a 10 loan limit or whatever it was. I forget exactly what the details were, but I was like, no, you're actually wrong. And here's why. These are free and clear properties. They don't apply, blah, 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 blah. And so, and I know it seems a little full of yourself, but you have to, because even the mortgage loan officers don't know what they're talking about in like a third of the time. And so if you are well educated, when you go into that conversation and you politely steer the conversation and let them know, hey, I know what's going on here, they just trust what you have to say so much more, and it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
And or make them think it's their idea, even though you just educated them.
Yep. I remember when you said in the conversation something you didn't say. But all right, we've covered a ton of topics here, and we could probably go another hour. I'd like to. We'll have to save it for the next time I see Jesse down at the farmer's market, because when I run into you, I always enjoy talking to you. So,
Well, thank you.
and then actually that
I'm
particular
doing-
that night, I was kind of done. I'm like, let's just go for a walk or something. I'm like, hey, there's Jesse's. I was like, all right, cool, man. Get to go see what he's up to. And now you're on the podcast with us. So it was awesome. Please mention the name of your foundation. I think you said you were willing to do that, and we can drop whatever you want into the show notes, contact information wise. But yeah, tell us, give us the foundation elevator pitch, and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
Oh, totally. So it's called the Mountain Laurel Foundation. I think the email address is like mountainlaurelfoundation@gmail.com. We're keeping it real cheap here. So if you have any interest in that, send it over. If you want to talk about some projects we've got going on, send that over. Right now, what we're doing is we're outlining specific, clearly defined projects in multiple areas. And we're going to slowly implement them over probably the next year to year and a half and see where our traction is. We do the same thing, the whole 80-20 of that. We're going to figure out in which of these areas we have traction, and then dial back on the other programs, let them kind of naturally go away, and then really focus in where we've got the most impact. So it's going to be a year of exploration and such, which I'm totally excited about. But yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, cool. And and just point out to everybody, this is what entrepreneurship and specifically real estate as to what we're involved in allows you to do with your life. So, I'm able to take control over how and how much you earn opens up all kinds of doors to other things that you want to accomplish when you're not burning 40 plus hours making somebody else rich. So, Darren, you got anything you want to follow up with, ask before we...
I just want to thank Jesse for his time. This has been incredibly valuable for me personally. Thank you, because all the human element side of this that you've touched on as far as life in general, that things it's allowed you to do or going to do in the future to change lives, that I resonate with that. I'm on the emotional side, and I'm blown away. So I want to talk more about it later offline. As well, and just really appreciate the time and just the fact of what you've accomplished in such a short period of time. It also blows my mind. So, man, kudos to you.
No, well, thank you. I sincerely appreciate that. Yeah, we'll get together and chat about it. Sorry we didn't talk too much about the real estate stuff. I can also get into that, and I really enjoy it, but that's just not the way the conversation went.
That's how we roll. It's organically, just where it goes, and we're fine.
Well, like you mentioned, you had the broad kind of foundational umbrella. A lot can happen underneath it. We kind of think of the real wealth solutions in the same way. I mean, real is in there for the real estate, solutions is in there for whatever you want that real estate to accomplish. So yeah, we like speaking on broad topics, but we could talk delinquency rates or whatever next time if you want, but I think this was just fine the way it was. So yeah, man, I appreciate your time. I'll go ahead and wrap it up. We want to thank you again for joining us here, Real Wealth Solutions Podcast. On behalf of Darren Light, I am Greg Scully, and many thanks again to Jesse Shelton for joining us today. We will see you on the next episode.